Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Will this be the end of home building as we currently know it? Learn about 3D printed homes, what they are, what its promise is, what its limitations are, and what it's going to do to future housing values. It's the third and final installment in our 3 housing supply crisis series episodes today on Get Rich Education. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They've provided GRE listeners with more loans than anyone, and it's where I got my last few loans. They finance single-family income property up to 4plexes. They're the #1 lender for beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and get your custom plan for expanding your cash-flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. A lot of investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market could provide both. Jacksonville, Florida, with 27% lower home prices than the national median and 1% higher rents, their market has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. They often have available inventory in Jacksonville. Start at cashflowandgrowth.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Moosehead Lake, Maine to Lake Powell, Arizona, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. In recent history, there have been 1 to 1.5 million homes available for sale at any given time in America, and it stayed in that range for years. Last year, it fell below that. It dipped below 1 million. Well, this spring, it fell below 500,000. And today, if wannabe homeowners make only a full price offer on a home, well, then their bid might fall below the middle of the pack of bidders, because homes are selling for an average sale price of 2% greater than the asking price. People are willing to eat paint off the siding of an available home just to get inside to take a look at it. But a lot of people aren't even taking a look at it. Last month, 63% of surveyed buyers said they put a bid in without even seeing the property in person. The median sales price for existing homes is now up 19%. That's through April, year over year, up to a price of $342,000, according to the NAR. The Commerce Department said that the median price of a new build home sold in April was $372K. That's up fully 20% from a year earlier. Now, that is skewed by a greater proportion of sales on the higher end, but it's still pretty remarkable. So as we continue to investigate this housing supply crisis here in America, 4 weeks ago, we talked with a developer of conventionally built homes in Colorado. 2 weeks ago, we discussed building on the cheap with shipping container homes in Florida. And that was really only a small apartment solution potentially, and they actually weren't so cheap, as you found out. Today, it's the third of this interstitially released 3-part series. You're going to learn more about 3D printed homes, and if they're soon going to become so efficient and so quick to build and so cheap that it's going to make the prices of all homes permanently cheaper. And would that then devalue all of your existing properties? It's been quite well documented that part of what is creating the housing supply shortage today is this inability to bring more new build product on to create more new construction homes due to things like those well-documented shortages of lumber and the copper for the wiring. But there are some other supply choke points that are crippling home builders, like PVC pipe and kitchen appliances of all sorts. I was just learning about a builder in Utah that found a less expensive way to home build using bamboo constructed homes. The upshot of that is that if it's successfully done, well, it only discounts $5,000 or $10,000 off the price of a total home. So not much of a solution there. Now, USA Today, just to give you some idea of the gravity of the housing supply crisis, they were recently reporting on what they termed the liveaboard sailboat craze off the coast of Florida, where people now, usually lower income people, are increasingly having to live on sailboats with this increase in housing prices, and they just float around Florida, docking up in different places, sometimes sailing south to the Caribbean islands in the summer. Well, higher housing prices are pushing more and more people to live on these sailboats, and these people use rainwater for cleaning and a black plastic bucket for bathing. So not much of a sustainable housing solution there. Well, building a home today is rather expensive and complicated, and if you add to that the lack of nationwide standards and practices for building, and the lack of platforms for disseminating good new information among homebuilder professionals, it means that you can often find that site logistics and materials are still managed by someone at a job site sitting inside their Ford F-150 truck, writing with an ink pen and paper on a notepad. Now, here at GRE, we contacted a company called SQ4D that makes 3D printed homes. They're based in New York, and in fact, they made America's first ever 3D printed home. It was on Long Island. Now, I've never worked with 3D printing in a professional capacity myself. 3D home printing uses a lot of concrete. I have worked with concrete quite a bit when I was a concrete construction inspector in both Pennsylvania and Alaska. Now, if you don't know what three-dimensional printing is, it is what is known as additive manufacturing. Just imagine a giant tube of toothpaste. Well, this giant tube of toothpaste has a special kind of concrete inside it, and it is squeezed from a tube that's at the end of a printer arm, and this printer arm moves on rails. And of course, it's not squeezing out toothpaste, it's squeezing out concrete, and this concrete that's squeezed out is deposited layer upon layer upon layer to build the walls of a home. So that's the general premise of how a 3D printed home is constructed. And before I talk more about that, let's talk about that material that's most commonly used in these home types. It is predominantly concrete construction, although a lot of other materials can be used for printing, of course. But this concrete, it comes out of this nozzle head, like a big toothpaste tube. Concrete is the most widely used building material in the world because of its strength and its durability. And here we are. GRE is a real estate investing show. Concrete is the most widely used building material in the world. This is episode 347, and I still haven't even spent time talking to you about a substantial material cost and input in this real estate that you're invested in, that being concrete. Even a wood frame home often has a concrete foundation. So before I continue with 3D printed homes, let's talk about concrete that's used inside them. A lot of people, they will point down at a sidewalk along the street and they will call it a cement sidewalk. Well, technically that's not true. Cement is just one of the many ingredients in concrete. So concrete is made up of a few things: gravel, sand, water, and cement that's all mixed together. So just that one ingredient of concrete, cement, that's like a fine whitish gray powder which is manufactured in a plant. And I told you that one of the ingredients of concrete is sand. There is an international sand shortage which disrupts things at times. But there is one more main ingredient in concrete. It's a core ingredient in the real estate that you own, and it might surprise you. In addition to the gravel, sand, water, and cement, there is added air. Yeah, there might be 5 to 8% air entrained in concrete, and that's in order to allow for thermal expansion and to help concrete react better to freezing and thawing cycles where it's exposed to the elements. And concrete is used worldwide in just about every type of construction, not just homes, but larger buildings and roads and bridges, airports, subways. And now that we're in an era of where we all have this increased attention and concern about the environmental impact of construction, You know what? Concrete actually performs pretty well when you compare it to other building materials through that lens. As with any building product, production of concrete and its ingredients, it does require energy, and that in turn results in the generation of carbon dioxide or CO2. But the amount of CO2 generated in concrete construction is pretty small. But this is an increasingly important consideration when you consider the future of building in these increasing green concerns. Concrete is pretty resource efficient because the ingredients don't require a lot of processing. And this bodes well for the future of concrete construction. So most materials for concrete are acquired and manufactured locally. So think about how that minimizes transportation energy. That makes sense because a lot of times you can get sand and gravel from a local quarry. Concrete has a long service life. Well, therefore, that increases the period between when the time inevitably comes around down the road for reconstruction and repair and maintenance and all the environmental impacts that go along with that. And concrete can also use these recycled industrial byproducts that are sometimes put into concrete in small percentages, like fly ash and slag and silica fume, and then that reduces the quantity of landfilled materials. So there really are some green benefits of building with concrete that a lot of people don't see on the surface. Now, that great, unique selling proposition of building a 3D printed home is that you can enjoy savings on labor cost, and there can also be a pretty rapid speed of construction. But some of the sensational media headlines that you read, they don't really hold up in real life. Like you might read a headline that says, "A robot can print your new home in one day for just $20,000. Well, that's not really true because it's not the type of home that is livable at all. But a home can often be 3D printed with only 2 or 3 human beings on site while the construction is taking place. Often it's only 2 people with a third person watching for safety. One person is often managing the concrete hose because that's such a critical operation. Now, the machines, the printers themselves, although there still aren't very many of them in the world, and they sure are not readily available to you if you wanted to, say, print your own home, the machines have shown a good degree of accuracy. In fact, some of the best 3D printers for homes are accurate to perhaps a millimeter or two, which is less than 1/4 of an inch, even less than 1/8 of an inch. The Winsun company in China is doing a lot of experimenting with this. So the 3D printers themselves, they are pretty sound machines. Now, with all that being said, those are some of the pluses and the promise of printed homes, but there are still a great many problems with printed homes. The material still has a long way to go because the concrete that's used is a custom-made concrete and it's produced in these really tiny batch sizes. It's pricey to produce the material. It's really expensive to make this specialty concrete used just for 3D printed homes. The mixing of the material at the print head needs some help as well. Now, the concrete is not heated up, but it does need time to set up after printing, and it intrinsically emits heat as it sets up. That's called an exothermic reaction. Now, another big problem or limit of printed homes is that most of the printing takes place outside, outdoors, on site, right there in place where the structure is going to stay for decades. It does not take place so much in a factory. Well, with the home printing taking place outdoors, if there's any real chance of wind or rain, that can damage the concrete that's being printed. So then often what needs to be done if it's an on-site job before any home printing can take place is that first contractors have to build a structure around where the printer and the walls of the home are going to be. So just imagine a giant tent or a big bubble. So yes, this giant tent is built to get protection from the wind and the rain, and even bright sun can negatively affect the concrete as it sets up. And then after they build the tent, they can more safely do the 3D home printing with the concrete. And then when the concrete sets up and hardens, they can deconstruct the giant tent. See, if there's, say, some wind when the printer is printing and you get a sloppy line, as these rows of toothpaste-like shaped concrete are laid on top of each other, well, then that sloppy line, that can show both inside and outside the walls of your home. You might not notice it so much outside, but inside, you really don't want that sloppy line there, or else now you might have to put drywall over the sloppy lined concrete in order to get a smooth surface and make it more livable. And even worse, really sloppy lines could make a structure weak. Concrete often cracks with spalling or shrinkage cracks, and then one has to put some sort of filler or spackle over it. And it is common to have walls that are rounded at the corners as well in these printed homes. The walls aren't at 90 degrees a lot of times. Now, to avoid making that tent or bubble to protect against the elements if you print on site, instead, homes can be printed in a factory. Well, that way you're indoors and you can control your environment. But there you run into a set of problems as well. A home, even a small, say 1,000 square foot concrete home, that weighs maybe 50 to 100 tons. Well, then all of it would have to be moved from a factory onto the site where the house is going to go. So that brings in a number of costs. In a printer, it weighs closer to 1 ton. So often it's easier to take the printer outdoors onto the site where you might have to do the tented thing. And then there is another factor to consider here. In fact, it is one of the same limitations as what we discussed here on the show 2 weeks ago with shipping container homes. And that is that homes don't just simply have 4 walls and a ceiling and a floor, and that's it. Homes have cutouts in the walls for windows and fireplaces, and so utilities can run through the walls like plumbing and electrical, water, sewer, and HVAC. Now, to make these holes in the walls, and that's what the construction industry calls penetrations for utilities, the 3D printer, as it's printing another row, it can stop and pause its printer operation in order to leave gaps, and then as subsequent higher layers are printed, it can bridge over these gaps with different little tools as more and higher layers get deposited ever higher. So this way it leaves a hole for, say, a utility connection. So this adds more time and complexity to the printing operation. And then, of course, there are all of those amenities that go inside of a home, and a few of those can actually be printed. Even a printed bathtub, like that does exist. They can do that now. And then you have other items that are completely impractical to print, like a refrigerator, toilet, dishwasher. Imagine trying to print glass for the windows, or print a furnace, or boiler, or roof shingles, or all these other things, all these other components that can't be so easily printed that do make the cost of a 3D printed home keep going up higher and higher and higher. Now, a lot of 3D printed homes end up using really then a combination of printed material and a traditional construction home. So even printed homes are oftentimes a hybrid with conventionally constructed homes. Another major limitation of 3D printing today, it's still really hard to print a second floor, like with the Vulcan printer. Printing a second story is still pretty difficult to impossible. So then the first floor would be printed with concrete, and it would be quite strong. 6,000 psi or more. That's pounds per square inch. That's often used as a strength metric in the industry, psi. But then if that first floor is printed concrete, well, the roof and trusses are usually still wood. There are concrete roofs, though. They are some of the promises and limitations of 3D printed homes. You are listening to episode 3 out of 3 in this series on helping solve America's housing supply crisis today, where there might be opportunities for you and threats to you as an investor. Part 1 was on conventionally built homes. Part 2 was shipping container homes. Today, it's 3D printed homes. I've got more for you on 3D printed homes shortly, including I'm going to answer the big question, will printed homes soon be so cheap and quick to print that it will make the value of all the existing homes plummet, including the ones that you own? Also, I have a related fact about building a new home today that will just blow your mind. In fact, it doesn't even sound right the first time you hear it. I actually told my dad about this the other day, and he thought I made some kind of mistake or I misspoke, but I sure didn't. First, everything that we do here at GRE are free resources for you, including this show. We do have sponsors that support the show. We play their commercials each week. These are for the types of services that a savvy investor like you would want today anyway, many of which I use myself. If you want to support us, well, I'm still not accepting any donations here. There is more and more of a trend with these pay-for podcasts, but I have no inclination to go that direction. Just go ahead and support our sponsors instead. Some companies give us a referral fee, consideration too. Many don't. Most guests don't. They're here to bring you value, and there's nothing in it for us. Now, some have said that they would love if I would produce a video course. People would pay me for that if I produced one. I've got news for you. I just produced and now completed a short video course for you, my first one ever, and it's completely free at getricheducation.com/course. Buy and hold real estate pays you 5 ways at the same time. It's a concept that I coined around 2014. There do get to be some numbers flying around, though, when we add up your awesome rate of return from all 5 ways. So what I did then is produce a series of 5 videos. With videos, it really helps get the point across with the numbers better than it does in an audio format. And I add up the return that you get from each one of your 5 profit centers, 1 video per profit center. And what happens throughout the series is that I add up your rate of return at the end of each of the 5 videos, and then your high rate of return, it keeps building up and compounding through each video, and then at the end of the 5th and last video, it culminates in your total return from real estate, which is awesomely high. But I don't want to give away that awesomely high rate of return number. Instead, I'll let you watch as it builds up. It's kind of fun. I'm happy to tell you that this 5-course video series that I made, and the videos really help you so much with these numbers. It is 100% free and available to you now at getricheducation.com/course. Real estate has made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. But you know what? I just can't believe how little it's talked about, where your returns actually come from. People that have invested in real estate for 30 years can't tell you how real estate investors really got wealthy. Billionaire real estate investors can't really tell you how real estate investors got their wealth. And exceedingly few real estate educators tell you about this. So that's why I break it down for you free in the new course. I just released it a few days ago. And yes, it is produced for you totally free. No strings attached, no logins or anything like that. It's the 5 ways that real estate pays you short video course. You want me to sell you something? Thanks, but I'm still not doing it. It's not $495. And by the way, I also have no problem with people that charge for courses. It might be worth the money that you pay. That's fine with me. My first ever course is now finished, available, and completely free for you now at getricheducation.com/course. I'm Keith Weinhold. I'm coming back with the big answers on 3D printed homes as you bookmark getricheducation.com/course straight ahead. Starting in real estate seems hard for some. Even experienced investors can find it difficult to achieve the success that they had hoped for. What if there was one small change everyone could make that would solve these challenges? Allie Boone offers a book that really no one else has. It's an easy-to-understand glimpse into the real estate investing industry and your mindset. It's life lessons on hacking your mind before you hack your wallet. Her book to grab on Amazon is called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your EQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an EQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
This is Ridge Lending Group's president, Shaylee Ridge. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. And remember, don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. A couple years ago on the show, I talked about $20,000 homes that Amazon was selling. Those sorts of things made flashy headlines so that you would click on an article, but you soon learn that to make a home actually livable and enjoyable, it means that you're spending well into the six figures. Today, we're talking about 3D printed homes. One big takeaway when it comes to using alternative construction methods to a more conventional house or to a wood frame house is that no matter how you build, no matter what construction methods are used, there is still a substantial material cost. There's still a substantial labor cost. There's still a cost for planning and design with regard to things like architecture and engineering and drainage around the site and the neighborhood. And then there is still a big expense that cannot change, and that's the cost of the land. That's still going to be there. All of those major cost inputs, they still exist no matter how you build today, whether that's a log cabin or a 3D printed home or a shipping container or a conventionally built home. But you know what? There is one more major cost input, no matter how you build, that has only become costlier in recent years. Do you have any idea what that is? And yes, this is above and beyond the cost of materials, labor, the land cost, and the planning and design costs. No matter how you build, you are still going to have to deal with the cost of regulations. Yeah, it's the regulatory cost to comply with governments, and the amount that regulation costs home builders today is going to blow your mind. It is a cost that has got to get passed on to home buyers as well. I'm going to do some rounding to the nearest $1,000 here. According to a new study by the National Association of Home Builders, their findings were just released earlier this month. Get ready. Can you believe this? Regulations imposed by all levels of government now account for an astounding $94,000 in building a new single-family home. Not $9,400. Yeah, my dad was thinking that I must have meant $9,400 when I told him about this on the phone the other day. But no, it's $94,000. And this $94K, it makes up fully 24% of the current average sales price of a new single-family home. My gosh! For some people, it wasn't that long ago when they remember buying an entire existing house for $94K. Now, of this jaw-dropping $94,000 figure, about $41K is attributed to regulation during development, like that site work, and then the other $53K, that's due to regulation during construction of the house itself. Now, this fact with these high regulatory costs, that is a bad thing in alleviating the housing supply crisis. But for all of the properties that you currently own or you're under contract to buy, this is a good thing. This regulatory environment, it effectively boosts the value of all of your properties, even the home that you live in, because in order to build an adequate replacement structure, it costs that much more money. Now, to quote NAHB Chairman Chuck Fauci about the findings from this study that his own company undertook, and by the way, Chairman Fauci is a custom home builder himself in Tampa, Florida, he says, quote, "This study illustrates how overregulation is exacerbating the nation's housing affordability crisis and that policymakers need to take bold steps to reduce or eliminate unnecessary regulations that will help builders increase the production of quality, affordable housing to meet growing market demand." And that's the end of his quote. And the NAHB study noted that this $94,000 per house cost of regulation, that does not take into effect how rising lumber and other material prices over the past year have raised housing costs, like how soaring lumber costs have added $36K to the price of a typical new home itself. Yeah, NAHB completed another report last month, and that shows that rising lumber prices have soared more than 250% since April 2020, and how that's added $36K to the price of a typical new home. But a lot of people know that study. That's kind of old news, but just understand that that figure is on top of the $94,000 cost solely due to regulation. So Getting back to 3D printed homes and their future, some important things to keep in mind then are that construction will get more automated, yes, but it's really slow. To live in an entire house where the whole thing is printed, that is still really a stretch, and it will be for quite some time. The 3D printing machines themselves are pretty reliable as long as you control that environment, but the material and the accompanying construction processes still have a ways to go. So when will 3D printed homes become commercially feasible? Well, if it ever happens, it's not going to be anytime soon. Not in the short term, not in the medium term. It's still not easy for 3D printed house companies to turn a profit. Even if a small fraction of the world's homes ever became printed, that could be seen as quite a success. That is what one industry executive told me. And even if a small fraction of homes became printed, not everyone's going to want to live in one. It's sort of a preferred taste to live inside these printed walls that look like layers of toothpaste from a tube that were deposited on top of one another. So think of it like today, how not everyone prefers to live in a log cabin home or an A-frame home. That's really the way to think of printed homes, not as something that would be mainstream, most likely, but as more of a preferred taste to live that way, something niche-y. Now, whether it's 3D printed homes or bamboo homes or shipping container homes, there are some key things to remember. If new construction techniques do make homes faster and cheaper to build, then resultantly, the cost of land would probably increase. Really, the bottom line here in wrapping up this 3-part housing supply crisis series is that what is protective of your existing property values is that every new type of home construction that a person tries is still going to bear the cost of the land. And it's still going to bear the cost of design, like architectural and engineering. And there's still going to be some cost of labor. And then the cost of government and environmental regulation is going to persist. And that cost continues to go up, even faster than the rate of inflation. That's the bottom line. A lot of these fixed inputs just don't change. Coming up here on the GRE podcast are some world-class guests. Rich Dad sales advisor Blair Singer is going to be here. Also, the return of one of the most legendary investors in history is Jim Rogers is going to join me from Asia to discuss what you as an investor need to consider in a post-pandemic world. You know, at times over these last few years, people ask me if I would do a video course like that they could buy and pay for, something like a $495 course. Well, last week I completed shooting a short course about the 5 ways that real estate pays you, and it's 100% free. I really want you to see it so much that I made sure that it was put out publicly on our Get Rich Education YouTube channel, or you can watch all 5 short videos directly at getricheducation.com/course. If you, as a real estate investor, don't find this to be the most important 1 hour of strictly educational videos that you've ever watched, I would be surprised. With each of the 5 profit centers, besides adding up what your typical return would be, I tell you where each of the 5 profit centers actually come from. Like number 1, with appreciation, that comes from the market and your lender for giving you leverage. Number 2, cash flow comes from your tenant and their job. Number 3, your return on amortization, that also comes from your tenant and their job. The 4th of 5 profit centers, your tax benefits, comes from the government. And then your 5th one, the inflation profiting benefit, that also comes from the government. So it's really getting into how to effectively and ethically use other people's money 3 ways at the same time as a real estate investor. You're using the tenant's money, the bank's money, and the government's money. So it's really the most important video series I've ever done, structured as a short course, where in total, all 5 videos come out to about 65 minutes in length, and making it visual really helps you see where those numbers come from. It helps you see how I can say and drop that heresy that compound interest is lame and that financial leverage builds wealth. It all culminates at the end in your total rate of return from all 5 profit centers, Watch the entire course free right now. Enjoy the video series at getricheducation.com/course. I'll see you next week. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.